I'm sorry to, but what exactly do you think was noteworthy about the talks in Geneva? You said, and this is a quote, I think, there was not a meaningful, tangible demonstration of success, but it was noteworthy. They spent 2 weeks together. I mean, what was noteworthy about that, other than they spent a ton of money at luxury Swiss hotels?
I would point you to
probably ate very well. I mean,
what I meant was that they didn't solve a particular problem in the political process. Even Mr. de Mistura said that.
Right.
But he said himself that the talks didn't break down, that
they
could
didn't
have
break down. They just didn't accomplish anything.
They could have
so
dialogue.
Where's this?
It's very early on in this process.
But they didn't have dialogue, did they? I mean, it was
through proximity
exactly.
talks. But that's still dialogue, even though it's not face to face. And what Mr. de Mistura said, and what the secretary said in Moscow, is that we would like to see the next step be face to face talks. They did come up with a list of commonalities, about a dozen or so commonalities. These are ideas, principles that both the opposition and the regime agreed to in terms of the essence of what Syria should be and can be in the future.
Like what? We all breathe air. I mean,
unified, non-sectarian, free of terrorists. I mean, I could get the list for you. It's online. You can look at it yourself. Okay. But there was a list of 12 things that now the regime and the opposition agreed to, which had not existed before.
But presumably, whether they had put them down in a list or not, I mean, they all agreed that they previously, even before the meeting in Geneva, that they agreed that bad things shouldn't happen in Syria. That's not really any kind of progress, and even you said there wasn't any progress. So I'm just curious. I don't get how did someone looking at this, analyze or come to the judgment that there is a sense of momentum when you even say that nothing was accomplished, except for a list of things that they probably that they had agreed on already.
Well, again, I'd say a couple of things, Matt. First of all, we both know that the first attempt failed, and it only lasted a few days, and because of the continued.
Well, I think that's the first time you guys have said that, admitted that it collapsed into.
Well, I mean, fact's a fact. I mean, it lasted a few days, and they all left, and part of the reason was because of the continued bombing. So let's look at the short answer to your question is it is noteworthy and it's significant that they were able to actually conduct a full round of these proximity talks without interruption, and at the end to come up with a list of common principles and ideas. I'm not overselling that. I'm not overselling that at all.
Okay.
As I said, we didn't have, there weren't. Even Mr. de Mistura said there wasn't like a tangible mark of progress in the political process necessarily, but that we were able to have them conduct these talks without interruption was not insignificant, and that at the end of it they at least agreed to some common principles. And up until maybe you know something I don't, but as far as I know, the regime and the opposition had never come together and agreed to a dozen list of common principles and ideas. The opposition had in Riyadh. They had come up with a common set of negotiating principles, but it's the first time that I know in 5 years that the regime was even willing to, even through a proxy, communicate with the opposition on a common set of principles going forward for Syria.
Some of those are like there shouldn't be any terrorists in Syria. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. I don't think not even the regime disagreed with the idea that Syria should be unified and secular and
no argument. And again, I'm not trying to oversell it. I'm just trying to say that it was significant and noteworthy that they had these talks.
Very last thing, as you said, the secretary did say several times that the Russians are not wedded to Assad, but that's not really the point. Do you have any indication that the Russians are prepared to break up with Assad? They may not be married, but I'm trying to. It's wedded is the word here, right? Mm-hmm. That he used, that you used.
Yeah. It's
not really a point of whether they're married or not. It's a question of whether they're ready to break up with him. Is there any indication that is the case?
I won't speak for the Russians in that regard. I'm not aware of a quote-unquote indication that they're ready to ditch Assad, but we don't believe that they are so committed to him, the person, that they won't consider a process through which this transition can get to a government away from Assad.
But I covered Geneva, the first Geneva, And that was the Russians' position then. I don't, that doesn't, you haven't swayed them at all. The Russian position has been consistent.
I wasn't arguing that we swayed them or tried to change
All
them.
right.
Nothing's changed about our position. And again, we want, ultimately, this has got to be solved. The question of Assad in the future has got to really be solved by Syrians themselves. Okay?